There's a fear that lives in you that doesn't match the size of your life. You know the one. It shows up in the middle of ordinary moments, when someone raises their voice just slightly, when a text goes unanswered for too long, when you're standing in a crowd and suddenly your chest tightens like something terrible is about to happen. But nothing terrible is happening. Not now, not here, and yet your body remembers something. Your nervous system braces for an impact that never comes. You feel the grip of an anxiety so old, so deep, it's like trying to recall a dream from someone else's sleep. This is the fear without a name. The one you've carried for so long you thought it was just you. Your personality, your sensitivity, the way you're wired. But what if I told you it isn't? What if the fear that makes you freeze when you should speak, that keeps you scanning every room for danger, that convinces you you're too much or not enough? What if it was never yours to begin with? There's a phenomenon where someone loses an arm, but still feels it there. Phantom sensations from a body part that no longer exists. The nerves remember. The brain reaches for what used to be. Your psyche does this too. You carry emotional weight that doesn't belong to your story. Grief you didn't earn. Terror that predates your memory. A sorrow so large it feels like it's been there since before you had words. And maybe it has. You are holding something passed down to you, like a cursed heirloom, a weight pressed into your hands before you were old enough to refuse it. You became the keeper of someone else's pain. Most often that someone was your mother. Not because she meant to harm you, not because she didn't love you, but because pain, when it goes unprocessed, doesn't disappear. It migrates. It finds a vessel. And the closest, most open vessel is always the child. So you inherited it. Her anxiety became your hypervigilance. Her unspoken rage became your people-pleasing. Her buried grief became the heaviness you wake up with, the exhaustion that has no medical explanation. You've been carrying her fear in your body like a second skeleton. Maybe you've started to notice the pattern, the way your fear spikes in situations that should feel safe, the way you hold your breath when you're around your mother, or the way your body tenses even when you're just thinking about calling her. Maybe you've wondered, why do I feel responsible for her mood? Why do I apologize for things that aren't my fault? Why do I feel guilty for living a life she never got to have? Or maybe the questions are quieter, more haunting. Why can't I ever relax? Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something important, even when I've done everything right? Why do I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, even when there's no shoe? These aren't random glitches in your nervous system. They're echoes, reverberations of a history you lived but don't remember. A transmission that happened in glances and silences, in the way she held you, or didn't, in the tremble of her hands, the flatness in her voice, the distance in her eyes. You learned the world through her. And if her world was dangerous, terrifying, unbearable, then so was yours. But here's the truth that will set you free. This fear isn't a life sentence. It's a map. And once you learn to read it, you can finally find your way home. There is a reason you feel this way, and there is a way through. So how does it happen? How does a mother's pain slip across the border of her skin and take root in yours? It's not as simple as her telling you the world is dangerous. It's quieter than that, more ancient. It happens in the space before language, in the realm where your nervous system is still learning what safety feels like and what it doesn't. You didn't inherit her fear through words. You inherited it through her body. Picture this. You're an infant. You don't yet know what a dog is, or a stranger, or a thunderstorm. Everything is new. Everything is potential. And so, you look to the only compass you have, your mother's face. This is called social referencing. It's how you learn to navigate reality before you have the cognitive tools to do it yourself. When you encountered something unfamiliar, a loud noise, a new person, an open staircase, you didn't decide whether to be afraid. You asked her, with your eyes, with your entire alert body. And she answered, not with words, but with the subtle architecture of her expression. If her face softened, you moved forward. If it tightened, you froze. But what if her face tightened at things that weren't actually dangerous? What if she flinched when the doorbell rang? What if her breath caught when a stranger smiled at you? What if her body went rigid at the sound of raised voices, even joyful ones? You didn't question it. You couldn't. You simply absorbed it as truth. This is dangerous. That person is a threat. The world requires constant vigilance. When she trembled, you learned to tremble. When she pulled back, you learned to retreat. Her anxiety became your map of reality, and you've been navigating by it ever since. But it wasn't just her face. It was everything. The way she held you or didn't. The tension in her shoulders when she picked you up. The rhythm of her breathing. The warmth or absence of warmth in her touch. Your nervous system at that age wasn't fully formed. It was still under construction, and hers was the scaffolding. She was your external regulator, the one who taught your body how to calm down, how to feel safe, how to return to baseline after stress. Except, what if she couldn't? What if her own nervous system was stuck in a state of alarm? What if her body was still bracing for a danger that happened years or generations before you were born? Then you learned that too. You learned that relaxation is dangerous, that letting your guard down invites catastrophe, that safety is an illusion. This is vicarious fear learning. You didn't need to experience the trauma yourself. You just needed to witness her reaction to it. Her body taught yours. This is what survival looks like. This is what it feels like to be alive in a world that isn't safe. And so you learned to fear what she feared, even if you never knew why. The dog she recoiled from, the intimacy she avoided, the success she sabotaged. Her specific terrors became your inherited phobias, passed down like the family silverware, polished with use. Here's the part that makes it even more complex. You weren't just observing her, you were feeling her. There's a mechanism in your brain that allows you to experience what another person experiences. When you see someone smile, something in you smiles too. When you see someone in pain, you wince. This is empathy, and it's rooted in your neurology. But in infancy, this system is wide open, unfiltered. You didn't just feel for her, you felt as her. Her sadness became your sadness. Her terror became your terror. Her despair moved through you like weather, and you had no ability to say, "This isn't mine." So if she was chronically depressed, your system simulated depression. If she was perpetually anxious, your system learned anxiety as the default setting. Over time, those neural pathways deepened. They became your baseline. This is why you grew up so sensitive, so attuned, so capable of reading a room, a mood, a shift in someone's energy before they even speak. It's a gift, yes, but it came at a cost. Because when your boundaries are that porous, you don't just feel what others feel. You absorb it, you carry it, and you struggle even now to know where you end and someone else begins. Your empathy was forged in the fire of her pain, and while it's made you deeply compassionate, it's also made you exhausted, because you've been holding not just your emotions, but hers, and maybe everyone else's too. This is the architecture of borrowed fear. It's not genetic, it's not fate, it's relational. It was built between you and her in 1,000 wordless exchanges before you even had a self to defend. But here's what matters. If it was built, it can be rebuilt. And that work begins with understanding not just how the fear was passed to you, but what was passed. What specific burden are you carrying that was never meant to be yours? Before you had words, you had her body. It was your first text, your first teacher. The place where you learned what it meant to be held, to be safe, to exist in relation to another human being. But what if that body was trembling? What if it was rigid with unspoken grief? What if the hands that held you were shaking, not from tenderness, but from terror she couldn't name? Then you learned a different language, one written in tension and distance, one spoken in held breath and sudden withdrawal. Your relationship with your mother didn't begin at birth. It began in the womb. That first environment, dark, fluid, enclosed, was more than just a biological space. It was an emotional one. You floated in her. You heard the rhythm of her heartbeat, the cadence of her breath. And you felt everything her body felt. When her stress hormones surged, so did yours. When her body constricted with anxiety, yours did too. Some spiritual traditions speak of the womb as an archive, a place that holds not just the physical blueprint for life, but the emotional and ancestral memory. You didn't just inherit her genetics, you inherited her emotional weather. Her unresolved grief, her silent rage, her exhaustion. Before you took your first breath, you were already breathing her in. And when you were born, that didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. Imagine being a newborn in a world where everything depends on one person. She is your food, your warmth, your survival. And so you become obsessed with her. Not in the way adults are obsessed with thoughts and plans, but in a raw, primal way. You watch her, you study her, you track every micro-expression, every shift in her energy. You had to. Your life depended on it. So you learned to read her moods before she even entered the room. You learned to sense the difference between the footsteps that meant she was coming to comfort you and the ones that meant she was coming because she had to, not because she wanted to. You became hypervigilant, not because you were anxious by nature, but because survival required it. And here's the thing, that hypervigilance never turned off. Even now, decades later, you're still scanning, still reading the room, still trying to predict the emotional weather so you can brace yourself in time. You learned that safety isn't a given. It's something you have to earn, something you have to manage. And the exhaustion you feel now, it's the exhaustion of a child who never got to rest. Touch was supposed to be your refuge, the place where you learned that your body is good, that you are welcome, that the world can hold you without collapsing. But not all touch is the same. There's the touch that soothes, firm, present, grounded. The kind that says, I'm here, you're safe, you can relax now. And then there's the touch that transmits distress, the hands that hold you but are somewhere else, the embrace that feels like an obligation, the arms that wrap around you but don't actually let you in. If your mother's touch was anxious, you felt it. Her hands were too tight or too hesitant. Her body was there, but her presence wasn't, and so you learned that even when someone is holding you, you can still be alone. Or maybe she couldn't touch you at all. Maybe she was so overwhelmed by her own pain that she had nothing left to give. And so you learned that your need for comfort was too much, that you were too much, and maybe even now you struggle with touch. You crave it, but you also fear it. You long to be held, but when someone reaches for you, your body stiffens, because somewhere deep in your cellular memory, you remember, touch isn't always safe. Sometimes it's just another way to feel alone. This is the somatic inheritance, the one written in your muscles, your breath, your autonomic nervous system. It's why you hold your jaw so tight, why your shoulders never quite drop, why you can't seem to fully exhale. You're still holding what she couldn't hold. You're still bracing for what she couldn't process. But here's the truth that will begin to set you free. This isn't a life sentence. It's a memory. And memories, even the ones stored in your body, can be rewritten. The question is, what exactly did she pass to you? What specific weight are you carrying that was never meant to be yours? Let's name it. Now we arrive at the heart of it. The question beneath the question, what exactly did you inherit? It wasn't just her fear, it was her unlived life, the dreams she had to bury, the voice she had to silence, the self she had to abandon in order to survive. And when she couldn't hold it anymore, you picked it up. Without knowing, without choosing, you became the keeper of everything she had to kill in herself. There was a version of your mother that never got to exist. Maybe she wanted to be an artist, but her family needed her to be practical. Maybe she wanted to travel, but poverty kept her tethered. Maybe she wanted to leave, but shame or fear or duty kept her locked in place. So she killed that version of herself. Slowly, quietly, she packed away the dreams like old clothes she'd never wear again. And she told herself it was fine, that it didn't matter, that this is just what women do, what mothers do. Sacrifice, endure, survive. but the body doesn't forget, and the psyche doesn't forgive. That unlived life didn't disappear. It went underground. It became resentment, bitterness, a quiet, suffocating rage that had nowhere to go. And when you came along, bright, open, full of potential, you became the vessel for it. Not because she wanted to hurt you, but because you were the only one close enough to absorb it. So now you carry her unlived dreams like a debt you didn't sign up for. You feel guilty for succeeding where she couldn't. You sabotage yourself when you get too close to freedom. You dim your own light because some part of you believes that shining would be a betrayal. Families have secrets, truths that everyone knows but no one speaks. The abuse that happened behind closed doors, the addiction that was normalized, the loss that was never grieved, the migration that severed an entire lineage. And here's the unbearable truth. What isn't spoken gets acted out. If your mother never talked about her terror, you became terrified. If she never processed her rage, you became the angry one, or the people pleaser, desperately trying to keep everyone calm. If she never mourned her losses, you became depressed, carrying a grief that has no story attached to it. This is the transmission of silence. The thing she couldn't say became the thing you couldn't stop feeling. And maybe you've spent your whole life trying to make sense of an emotion that was never about you, trying to fix a sadness that predates your existence, trying to fill a void that was carved out before you were born. Your anxiety might not be your anxiety. It might be her unprocessed terror, terror from a war she fled, a violence she endured, a loss she never had permission to grieve. But she couldn't tell you that. Maybe she didn't even know it herself. So you grew up thinking there was something wrong with you, that you were too sensitive, too broken, too much, when really you were just carrying too much of her. And then there's the cruelest inversion of all, the moment when you stopped being the child and became her caretaker. Maybe it was subtle. Maybe it was just the way she looked at you when she was sad, like you were the only one who could fix it. Or maybe it was overt. Maybe she leaned on you emotionally in ways that were too heavy, too soon. Maybe she told you things a child should never have to hold, and you rose to it. Because what else could you do? You learned to read her moods so you could stabilize them. You learned to be small when she needed space, and to be everything when she needed saving. You became her therapist, her confidant, her reason to keep going. You became the parent, and in doing so, you lost your childhood. You lost the permission to be messy, needy, uncertain. You learned that your worth was measured by how well you could manage her emotional state. That love was something you earned by being useful, not something you received just for existing. Even now, you struggle to ask for help. You struggle to let anyone take care of you. Because somewhere deep inside, you're still that child standing in the wreckage, trying to hold everything together so she doesn't fall apart. This is the unlived life. This is the weight you've been carrying. Not because you're weak, but because you're loyal, because you loved her, because you didn't know you had a choice. But here's the truth. You were never meant to save her. You were meant to be saved by her. And the work now, the painful, liberating work, is learning to put down what was never yours to carry. But before you can do that, you need to understand something even deeper. This didn't start with her. It started long before. With ghosts you've never met, with ancestors whose names you don't even know. Let's pull back the veil. What if I told you that the fear you carry isn't just your mother's? What if it reaches back further, through her mother and her mother's mother, and beyond? What if the weight on your chest is the accumulated grief of people whose names you'll never know, whose faces you've never seen, but whose pain lives in you like an heirloom passed down through blood and silence? This is the invisible loyalty, the unconscious contract you signed before you were born. I will carry what you couldn't. I will hold what you had to bury. I will remember what you were forced to forget. Every family has ghosts, not the kind that rattle chains in the night, but the kind that sit at the table during every meal, unseen but deeply felt. They are the ancestors who died too young, the ones who were exiled, erased, disappeared, the ones whose stories were too painful to tell, so they became secrets instead. And secrets don't die. they haunt. Maybe your grandmother fled a war, crossed an ocean, lost her entire world, and never spoke of it again. Maybe your great-grandfather survived something unspeakable and buried it so deep that even he forgot the shape of it. But the body remembers, the lineage remembers, and now you wake up with anxiety that has no origin story, a dread that feels ancient, a grief that doesn't belong to any loss you can name. Because you're not just carrying your mother's pain, you're carrying her mother's pain, and the pain of the women before her, the unspoken terrors, the stolen futures, the violence that was normalized, the migrations that severed roots, the assimilations that erased identity. This is transgenerational trauma, the inheritance of wounds that never healed because no one had the luxury or the language to heal them. Here's the unbearable paradox. You don't even know you're carrying it. It's just there, like a low hum beneath your thoughts, a heaviness you wake up with, a sense that something terrible is always about to happen, even when everything is fine. And the worst part, you feel responsible for it. Somewhere deep in your unconscious, you made a vow. You looked at your mother, and maybe through her, at all the women who came before, and you said, I will carry this so you don't have to. I will hold the pain so you can rest. It's an act of love, the purest kind. But it's also a trap, because now you're bound to their suffering. You become the candle child, the one who burns themselves down to illuminate the dead, the one who sacrifices their own joy, their own freedom, their own life, out of loyalty to people who are gone. You dim your light so it doesn't outshine theirs. You sabotage your success so you don't abandon them in their failure. You stay small, stay stuck, stay suffering, because to heal, to thrive, to live fully feels like a betrayal. And so you stay loyal to their pain, to their limitations, to their fear. But who gave you this job? Who told you that love requires self-erasure, that honoring them means repeating their suffering? The cruelest part of invisible loyalty is that it feels like love. It feels noble, sacred even. You tell yourself, if I let go of this pain, I'll lose them. If I heal, I'll be alone. If I break the pattern, I'll dishonor their sacrifice. But what if the opposite is true? What if staying stuck in their pain is the real dishonor? What if the best way to love them, to truly see them, is to live the life they couldn't? To become the version of yourself they were never allowed to be? What if your healing is the greatest gift you could give them? Because here's the truth. The ancestors don't need you to suffer. They need you to metabolize the suffering, to take the raw, unprocessed grief they couldn't hold and transform it into something else, into wisdom, into art, into freedom, into a life fully lived. They need you to break the chain, not out of betrayal, but out of love, out of the recognition that you are not their savior, you are their descendant. And your job is not to carry their burden forever, but to carry it through you and out the other side. So the question becomes, are you ready to release the debt you never owed? Are you ready to honor them by refusing to repeat their suffering? Because the first step to freedom is the hardest one. You have to tell the truth. You have to break the silence. You have to name what was done, what was lost, what was stolen, and grieve it, finally, out loud. Let's talk about why your story matters. The family wound thrives in silence. It grows in the dark, in the spaces between words, in the things no one dares to say out loud. And the first act of healing, the one that changes everything, is this. You have to speak it, not to blame, not to shame, but to name what happened. To pull it out of the shadows and into the light where it can finally be seen, felt, and released. Because you cannot heal what you cannot name. There's a reason why families enforce silence, why certain topics are off limits, why when you try to bring up the past, you're met with dismissal, deflection, or rage. It's because naming the truth threatens the entire system. It disturbs the carefully constructed myth that everything was fine, that we did the best we could, that it wasn't that bad, but it was that bad, and pretending otherwise didn't protect you. It just taught you to distrust your own experience, to silence your own voice, to carry the pain alone because speaking it felt too dangerous. So you learned to live through the trauma rather than with it. You learned to survive it without ever processing it. And that's the difference between someone who's been traumatized and someone who's stuck in trauma. One has a story, the other has a secret. And secrets keep you sick. They keep the past alive in your body, replaying in your nervous system like a song on repeat. Because until you can say, "This happened. This was real. This hurt me," the wound stays open. Naming it isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about giving the past a place, a beginning, a middle, and an end, so it can finally become history instead of a haunting. Here's what happens when trauma goes unspoken. The story becomes fragmented. Pieces are missing. The timeline doesn't make sense. Emotions flood in without context. You remember the feeling, but not the event. Or you remember the event but can't access the feeling. This is what keeps you stuck. This is what makes healing feel impossible. But when you begin to speak it to a therapist, to a journal, to a trusted friend, you start to create a coherent narrative. You take the scattered fragments and weave them into something whole. And in doing so, you transform raw pain into witnessed history. You move from "this is happening to me" to "this happened to me." Past tense, survivable, finished. This is the difference between being trapped in the story and being able to tell the story. One owns you, the other you own. But here's the thing, you can't do this alone. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationship, in the presence of someone who can hold your truth without flinching, without fixing, without making it about them. This is what witnessing does. It says, "I see you, I believe you. Your pain is real." And in that moment, something shifts. The shame loosens. The silence breaks. You realize you're not crazy. You're not broken. You were just holding something too heavy for too long. And sometimes, the act of telling your story doesn't just heal you. It heals the person who hears it. Because when you speak your truth, you give others permission to speak theirs. Your story is not just yours. It's medicine. It's a map for someone else who's still lost in the dark. So speak it, write it, sing it, paint it. However it needs to come out, let it. Not because you owe anyone an explanation, but because you deserve to be free of it. And once you've named it, once you've spoken it into the light, then you can begin the deeper work. The work of transmutation, of taking that pain and alchemizing it into something else, something sacred. Let's talk about how. Now we come to the threshold, the place where grief transforms into wisdom, where the wound that once bound you becomes the portal that frees you. This is the work of alchemy, not the kind that turns lead into gold, but the kind that turns suffering into sacred medicine. And it begins with a radical reframe. What if your deepest pain is also your greatest gift? What if the sensitivity that exhausts you is also your superpower? What if the empathy that overwhelms you is the very thing that will heal not just you, but others? What if the wound you've been trying to escape is actually the doorway to your most authentic self? This is the sacred wound, and it's time to reclaim it. The first step in transmuting the wound is this. You have to become the mother you needed. Not literally, not externally, but internally. You have to turn toward the part of you that's still that frightened child, the one who never felt safe, who never felt good enough, who never felt truly seen. And you have to hold them. This is called inner child work, and it's not a metaphor. That younger version of you still lives in your nervous system. They're still waiting for someone to say, "I'm here, you're safe now, you can rest." So you learn to speak to them, maybe through journaling, maybe through visualization, maybe by placing your hand on your own chest and saying the words out loud. "I see you, I'm not leaving. You're not too much, you're exactly enough." At first it might feel awkward, even ridiculous. But stay with it, because what you're doing is rewiring decades of neural pathways that learned love as conditional, safety as fragile, and your own needs as a burden. You're giving yourself what she couldn't give, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't have it to give. And in doing so, you break the cycle. You stop waiting for her to change. You stop needing her approval to feel whole. You become your own secure base, but sometimes the intellectual understanding isn't enough. Sometimes the body needs ritual. The soul needs ceremony, a way to externalize the pain so it can finally be released. There are ancient practices designed for exactly this, practices that honor the interconnection between you, your mother, and the ancestors. One such practice is called family constellations. In it, you create a spatial representation of your family system, seeing, often for the first time, how the burdens have been distributed. Who's carrying what? Who's been forgotten? Who's been scapegoated? And then comes the healing movement. You symbolically return the burden to its rightful owner. You bow to your mother, not in submission, but in respect. And you say, I honor your pain, but I leave it with you. I will live my own life now. It's not about rejection. It's about separation. It's about distinguishing your fate from hers. Another practice comes from the Hawaiian tradition, Ho'oponopono, a simple yet profound mantra of reconciliation. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. You speak it not just to her, but to the lineage, to the ancestors, to the unresolved pain echoing through the family field. And in doing so, you're not taking responsibility for their actions. You're taking responsibility for your response. You're cleaning the energetic residue. You're choosing to end the cycle with you. For those who identify as women, there are somatic practices like womb healing, rituals that involve visualization, water, breath, imagining the womb as a sacred vessel and releasing the cellular memory of inherited trauma. Washing away what was never yours to hold. These aren't just symbolic gestures, they're acts of reclamation. They're ways of saying, my body is mine, my life is mine, my future is mine. And here's where the transformation happens. Here's where the wound becomes sacred. Because once you've done the work, once you've named it, felt it, released it, you start to notice something shifting. The pain that once consumed you begins to clarify. It distills. And what's left is not bitterness, but compassion. Not rage, but clarity. Not fear, but fierce, unshakable presence. You realize that your hypervigilance taught you to read people with stunning accuracy. Your empathy gave you the capacity to hold space for others in their darkest moments. Your pain gave you a vocabulary for suffering that most people will never have. And that vocabulary is medicine. This is the alchemy. The wound doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It stops being a burden and becomes a calling. It stops defining you and starts refining you. You become someone who can sit with pain, your own and others, without needing to fix it or flee from it. You become someone who knows that healing isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And the gift you've been given, the one wrapped in all that suffering, is this. You know what it's like to carry too much. And because you know, you can help others put it down. But there's one final step, one last threshold to cross, and it's the hardest one. You have to forgive her, not because she deserves it, but because you do. Let's finish this. Forgiveness is the word that makes everyone uncomfortable, because it sounds like you're letting her off the hook, like you're saying what happened was okay, like you're erasing your own pain to make room for hers. But that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not excusing. It's not pretending the harm didn't happen or that it didn't matter. Forgiveness is this. I see what you did. I feel what it cost me. And I'm choosing to stop letting it define the rest of my life. It's not for her. It's for you. Let's be clear. Your mother was human, flawed, wounded, and in her woundedness, she wounded you. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe she was doing the best she could with what she had. But the best she could still wasn't enough. And you're allowed to grieve that. You're allowed to say, I needed more. I deserved more. And I didn't get it. That truth doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. And forgiveness doesn't ask you to erase that truth. It asks you to hold it without needing her to change, to apologize, to finally become the mother you needed. Because she might never become that. She might never acknowledge what she did. She might never even see it. And you cannot wait for her transformation to claim your own freedom. Forgiveness is the act of releasing the fantasy that the past could have been different. It's grieving the mother you needed and accepting the one you had, not because she was good enough, but because clinging to the hope that she'll change is keeping you stuck. She was limited, she was broken, she was human, and so are you. There's a powerful image in the work of family systems, the act of bowing to the parent. Not in submission, but in respect, in acknowledgement. You look at her, either literally or in your mind, and you say, "I honor the life you lived. I honor the pain you carried. I honor that you did what you could, even when it wasn't enough. But I am not you. Your fate is not my fate. Your pain is not my burden. I release it back to you with love, and I will live my own life now." This is the separation. The moment when you stop trying to save her, fix her, become her, or avoid becoming her. You let her be who she is and who she isn't, and you reclaim your right to be someone else entirely. It doesn't mean you cut her out of your life. It means you stop giving her the power to determine your worth, your choices, your future. You honor her by no longer betraying yourself for her. For so long, you've been the candle child, the one who burns themselves down to keep the family illuminated, the one who sacrifices their light, their warmth, their very life force, because someone had to hold the grief. Someone had to carry the load, but you're not a candle. You're a human being, and you were never meant to consume yourself for others. So here's the moment of reclamation. You stop burning for the dead. You stop sacrificing your joy out of loyalty to their suffering. You stop dimming your light so they don't feel ashamed of their darkness. You light your own fire, not from her flame, but from your own sacred spark, the one that's been there all along, waiting for you to tend it. And when you do, something miraculous happens. You don't just heal yourself, you heal the lineage, because you break the cycle. You refuse to pass the burden forward. You metabolize the pain so the generations that come after you don't have to. This is the ultimate act of love, not staying loyal to suffering, but transforming it, not repeating the pattern, but ending it. You are free now. Not because you've forgotten, not because the wound has disappeared, but because you've integrated it, because you've taken the inheritance you never asked for and alchemized it into something that belongs to you. Your empathy, your resilience, your capacity for truth, your refusal to pass on what was passed to you. This is the return, the moment when you come home to yourself, not as the child who carried too much, but as the adult who chose to put it down. You are no longer defined by her pain. You are defined by what you do with it. And that, finally, is freedom. Welcome home. Thank you for being here. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below with your reflections. I read everyone, and if you'd like to continue this work together, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Take care of yourself. You've done brave work just by listening.